Good morning. It's exciting to be speaking to this group, Creative, in the morning, and a goodly number of years younger than most of the audiences that I speak to. I do work at U of L. I'm an archivist, and we deal with special collections, including rare books, as well as rare manuscripts, some from the 13th century, as well as about 2.4 million photographs, most of them historic in nature, many of them about Louisville. In addition to that, we are a memory of the University of Louisville. I'm actually going to be walking a memory of the University of Louisville at noon today because a year and a half ago, a colleague and I put together a 128-page illustrated history of Belknap campus. That's the main campus of the university. They're at 3rd and Eastern Parkway, and I'm going to be walking backwards at noon today doing a walking tour of Belknap campus. But it's good to be with you. I do work in an archives that's the memory of the University of Louisville, and we have collections that are a partial memory of the greater Louisville area. And I do that a whole lot and enjoy that work. I just think it's awesome that when we have World Water Day and Creative Morning is doing water and we're surrounded by water and that's a water museum, you just can't beat that. There's no doubt about that. That river there is 981 miles long. It is the nation's second fattest river. There's only one river in the nation that has more water rolling down it, and that's the mighty Mississippi. And have you ever seen the mighty Mississippi before the Ohio River gets to it? It can be a very little bitty old thing. So this is the mighty Ohio River. She's 980 miles long. She begins about 604 miles as a river looks like a snake from an airplane. She begins about 604 miles up that way. Where does the Ohio River begin? In downtown Pittsburgh, where there used to be a baseball stadium called the Three River Stadium, where the Allegheny and the Monongahela came together to form the nation's second fullest river, the mighty Ohio. So as a river looks like a snake from an airplane, she curves and curls until mile 606, just 2 miles down the street. And there, the Ohio River does something that it does nowhere else in its entire 981-mile length. It drops 26 and a half feet and 2.5 miles historically, bubbling, churgling, fizzing, as it bubbles and churgles through gigantic boulders of limestone rock, forming what is the rapids or the falls of the Ohio. Now those rapids are distorted by a 1927 raised in 1960 dam. But nevertheless, those gigantic boulders of rock are still there, and they contain the bodies of zillions and zillions of squigglies that died there 375 million years ago. The fossil beds at the falls of the Ohio, the largest lateral exposure of fossilized coral from the Devonian era of prehistory on this earth. Literally a gigantic geological laboratory where you can see the evidences of the last ice age, fairly recent time as geologic time goes, but nevertheless, when this area was covered by a shallow tropical sea, those limestone fossil beds were formed, and the squigglies, the marine creatures, have been captured in that stone and held to this day. Travelers in this area in the 17th century from Europe, French missionaries, French traders, French adventurers, called this river La Belle Riviere, the beautiful river. Thomas Jefferson, when this area was part of Virginia, wrote a book called The Notes on Virginia, and he said the Ohio River is the most beautiful river in the world. Its bosom is smooth. Its water is clear, except for this outcropping of limestone rock, he said. The river is an adventurer's delight historically. It has been a ribbon of entry into what was originally the West. Adventurers, as well as utopians, as well as people seeking a new fortune, a new opportunity. And so this river has been important in the history of this community. The river attracts observation to it. People watch it because they want to see who's coming and who's going and why. The river is a romantic's delight. Have you ever noticed that this river or any river is full of nervous energy in the daytime? But then at night, it's almost as if it's weary from a full day of nervous energy, and it becomes calmer, and on a clear moonlight night becomes a sea of sparkling diamonds. So the river changes its personality. One of the phenomena that I think is most interesting to me, on a coldest day of the year, this river looks like a boiling, bubbling cauldron of hot liquid because steam rises from the warmer river into the colder air. So rivers have personalities, and this river has a personality, but it is beautiful, and it attracts people to it, and it has brought some unity as the communities around the falls, called the Fall Cities, have formed. New Albany, George Rogers Clarksville, Thomas Jeffersonville, and King Louis XVIville. All of those communities have formed there around the falls of the Ohio. But the river has a power, and a power that has historically come on cat's feet. It will come to you historically. In 1832, in 1848, in 1883 and 84, in 1906, 1913, 1927, 1945. But then it came to us as a city in biblical proportions in January of 1937. It came as a mighty, mighty flood. Not white water, but came to us into our city on cat's feet, relentlessly, slowly, inch by inch, covering 2/3 of the city of Louisville, 65 square miles of Jefferson County. This mighty river came to us in a relentless and a frightening way in January of 1937. 10 feet higher than the 1884 record. In January alone, it was a time in which we were above flood stage for 23 days. It was a time in which there were 19 inches of rain in January alone. The crisis period of the 1937 flood was Thursday to Sunday, January 24th through the 27th. That period of time, it rained an additional 4.5 inches, followed by 3 inches of snow, followed by sleet. There was an emergency declaration made and an evacuation order that the entire city west of 15th Street would have to be abandoned. Some were reluctant to go and instead moved to their second floor and to their attics. But it was slow coming. First, it never came directly from the river, or seldom, but it came up through the catch basins at the end of your street. And it bubbled up through and up over the gutter, up over the sidewalk, up the front steps, and another day or so later up the front steps onto the porch. And in 2/3 of the inhabited portions of the city, it was either ankle deep or above your head in water. And that was the mighty flood of 1937. There were 220,000 refugees from that flood. Some folks made it to the highlands or Crescent Hill. Some people made it to the rural hinterlands to stay with friends. Some people went to railheads, sometimes traveling through backyards and alleyways to get to railheads at 12th and Hill or at 10th and Broadway. And there they were herded into unheated railroad freight cars and taken as far away as Lancaster, Kentucky, or up into Huntingburg, Indiana, where those communities received them as refugees. There was a can-do attitude that was developed during that time. It almost reminds me of how you are when there's a big snow and you get out on the street and you help people push the car out of the snowbank, and you talk to people that you would otherwise never talk to. There was that kind of can-do attitude. But on the other hand, the mayor formed a committee on morale. And one of the slogans that was emblazoned around the city was, "Don't let us catch you not smiling." I think there may have been a problem. In addition to that, there were banners and posters put up in the aftermath of the flood that said, "San Francisco had its earthquake, Chicago had its fire, and Louisville will become a better city as a result of the 1937 flood." In the aftermath of that flood, there was a report that only 1,000 pianos were dumped directly into the Ohio River as the refuse of the flood in 1 week. In 1 week. Can you imagine what it was like to go to the sugar bowl in the cabinet above the sink and begin washing out the mud? And without heat in the homes, pulling away the plaster, pulling away the warped lath that was behind the plaster and getting the walls down to studs, and trying to wash the floor with a wooden floor buckled, and to try to wash it. And when you would wash it with cold water, or even if you were lucky enough to have hot water, you would wash it, and then there would be muddy ooze out of the baseboard. Wash it again, muddy ooze out of the baseboard. That's what it meant for this river to come on cat's feet into the city. There were some things that happened after the flood that were improved. We made a better landing strip at our major airport, Bowman Field, because we knew that among the 27 cities that sent relief and the thousands of people around the community, around the nation that sent money and relief supplies to us, that some were airlifted in, and our airport runway at the major airport, Bowman Field at the time, was not adequate, needed to be strengthened. And so we strengthened our runways. We began a process of building a wall around the city. From 1948 to 1988, we have built a 29-mile-long wall around the city. Sometimes it's stark, ugly concrete, and where the streets go through that concrete wall, we lower gates in their place when the river comes again. And at other times, it is an earthen levee, tall and handsome. And you can have a party on a levee, but you can't have a party on a stark concrete flood wall. And along that wall, we have installed a series of pumps that move the water, and if necessary, move the water up and over the wall directly into the Ohio River. And have you seen the biggest pump of all? There where Brownsboro Road curves onto Story Avenue, look to your right, and we have literally built a factory over Beargrass Creek. And when the river comes, we close the creek and pump all the water over the wall directly into the river. The Beargrass Pumping Station of MSD is a gigantic pumping system. Because, wait a minute, when the flood comes, You're going to still be taking a bath and flushing, aren't you? And it's still going to be raining, isn't it? And you've closed off the sewer system from the river, and you've closed off the creeks from the river. Well, then you better have some big pumps, that's all I can say, in order to deal with it. And so it is then that this beautiful river, this river with a gigantic, strong back, have you noticed? A flotilla of one towboat pushing 15 barges carries the equivalent tonnage of 870 18-wheeler semi-trailer trucks. That's a strong back. And that river serves us every day for the moving of heavy commodities. One other thing, that river's energy at the Falls of the Ohio has been harnessed. Maybe not enough, but it makes about 5% of your electricity through a hydro plant that is installed in that 1960 dam. And so it is that the river serves us. The river is beautiful. The river will come to us on cat's feet. And when it does, we snuggle down behind the wall. The greatest comfort of all is that the current system of flood protection protects us with 3 feet to spare. Now, that's a lot of water, and that would be a flood of even more biblical proportions. But there is 3 feet to spare between the 1937 height and topping the wall, where when the flood comes, we expect to be protected. There is some thought that we're in a rainier time, don't you think? There is some concern that another flood could top the wall, but nevertheless, we do now hide behind that wall. Beautiful river, a source of energy and strength, a source of legends and stories, a source of historical events, but at the same time, with a power that was demonstrated formidably in January, February of 1937, when it came on cat's feet and submerged virtually 2/3 of the city of Louisville. Thank you very much.